It's time for a Magnolia Grandiflora live edge bowl. Hi, I'm Kent and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. Today I've got a piece of Magnolia Grandiflora, otherwise known as Southern Magnolia. This is the magnolia that has the great big, really shiny leaves and huge white flowers that you see in the south part of the United States. Now, this wood is relatively plain inside, but what we're going to do today is we're going to make a live edge bowl. And what I have here is a log that's been split. We've cut it in the pith area. I've balanced both sides so that the grain patterns are pretty much balanced on both sides of where the pith used to be. And if you noticed, this blank is a little bit longer than it is wide. Well, if we were to do a traditional round rimmed bowl, we wouldn't need all this extra material. We could just do a small circle here and we have a nice round rim. But because we're doing a live edge bowl, we can get away with a little bit wider bowl blank. This is something for you to keep in mind when you're processing logs to turn live edge pieces with. Because what's going to happen is our rim is going to be, the high spot is going to be out here, but the low spot's going to dip down on the sides. So we don't need a great big wide bowl blank to make a relatively wide live edge bowl. Hopefully that makes sense. It's a little bit confusing because it's a little odd to see, but keep in mind this shape as I'm turning, and you're going to see what happens as the shape evolves and we start developing this live edge top rim for this bowl. So keep that in mind as I'm turning. I'm going to go ahead and get this mounted to the lathe, and we're going to start our Magnolia Grandiflora live edge bowl. Okay, so I'm going to mount this blank between centers, meaning I'm going to use a drive center and the tailstock. In order to get a good grip, I need to clear away some of the material in the center of this and remove some of that bark so that my drive center will grip the surface of the wood really well. So just take a chisel and a mallet and clear off some of that material. And there's the drive center I'm going to be using. This is a 4-spur drive center. It works really well. And the reason I'm using this is because it allows me to adjust the location of the mount on the lathe as I'm turning. So if I want to make a really subtle change, move the blank around just a little bit, like I'm going to do right here, I want to see where the top edges of the bowl are going to hit. And I can see they're off. This side is up higher, so all I have to do is release the tailstock and just slightly rotate the blank, tighten up the tailstock, and check again. All right, so there's the top edge of one side, and it's off a little bit, so I've got to make a little adjustment there. It might seem like it's a little extra work to do this, but having the top wings or the high sides of the bowl balanced will give a much better appearance to this piece once it's complete. Okay, so I'm going to start cleaning off this side. This was rounded out on the bandsaw, and it's really close to being round, but it's not true to the lathe and to the way that it's mounted in the lathe right now. So what I'm doing is just cleaning up the side of this so I can get a nice straight edge and make sure those two walls or two wings are even to one another. You can see I've got a little bit of area to turn there to get down in there. And I'm also going in this direction because I want to make sure that I'm pushing the bark onto the wood. If I were to go from right to left, in this case I'm going left to right. If I were to go from right to left, I could easily just strip that bark right off the top of the bowl blank, and obviously we don't want that. We want to try to retain the bark in place on a live edge bowl. Okay, with the blank being a little more trued up, I can speed up the lathe. It's interesting because the timing with the video and the light and everything, you can see the thin areas or the air blank areas going by as you're turning. Now, to my eye as I'm turning, this looks different, but you get a general idea there. Okay, so both the sides are cleaned up and it's balanced. That's going to help for a variety of different reasons. It's going to make it so it can speed up the lathe, but it's also going to make it easier to turn and smoother to turn. Now this wood is very green. This tree was just taken down not that long ago, and it is very wet, so it's really nice turning smooth green wood. You can see the longer shavings coming off. That's a good indication that this is a relatively fresh bull blank. Now, you also see that big gap between the bowl and the tool rest. You want to make sure that you stop frequently and move that tool rest up, especially at the beginning here when you take the corner off. When you take the corner off, that gap is big right away. So you want to move the tool rest up so you have good support. So what I'm doing is I'm shaping the bottom curve of the bowl, and I will go up the bark a little ways against the bark. I just want to be really careful and make light cuts. I don't want to accidentally strip that bark off the top of the live edge bowl. You can see how I'm not moving my hands or arms. I'm simply shifting my body weight. I have a video all about how to move your body while you're turning. It's a really important video, and it's extremely valuable to watch, especially if you're having issues getting smooth cuts on your bowls. Now I'm using my 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge to make these cuts. Now what I'm doing here is I'm checking these sides. I want to see that the sides are also balanced, and you really can only do that once you've cut away a little bit of material and you can see exactly what's exposed there. You can match up the bark edges. You can see the very small movement I'm making the tailstock, and then I'm lining up those sides so that this piece is relatively balanced. And what this is going to do, it's going to give us a balanced wings, which we did initially, and balanced sidewalls as well. So I can check the wings and make sure they're in the same spot. They didn't shift, and everything's looking good here. All right. So now with that little shift there, you can see that everything's moving a little wonky. That's because we moved it off center. So I'll start off by squaring up the bottom and making that nice and flat. And I really need to establish my tenon and my shoulders, because that will define the bottom or the base of the bowl. And once you're down past that flat spot, which I'm not, you can see there's a void in there still. I need to go a little bit deeper to make sure that whole bottom is nice and smooth. You also get a good indication that you're making a nice continuous cut when you have long shavings coming off. Now I'm going to mark where the tenon is going to be located. Got to be careful not to let the right side of those dividers touch the blank, because it will flip them over, obviously, and you do not want that. Now you're seeing what looks like vibration or movement here, and remember, that's because the bowl has been turned just a little bit out of its initial center. Now look at the tenon and the shoulder I'm creating right now. You can see that they're nice and smooth. So I created the shape for the tenon. Now I'm shaping the shoulder. Doing a push cut towards the headstock gives you the ability to make a really nice clean side cut here. Okay, now I changed the camera angle to this profile so you can really see what I'm doing as far as shaping. With the tenon and the shoulder established, that's going to be the bottom of the bowl. Right now, if I were to just let this be the outside of the bowl, I'm going to have this awkward flat bottom on the bowl. Instead, I want to have a nice smooth curve going from the shoulder at the bottom of the bowl up to the top of the wing. But you got to remember that I also don't want to be knocking off that bark, so I've got to be really careful when I get up here towards the top of the bowl. I'm going really slow here, and I'm taking it easy, not pushing, and then I'm going to stop and check, and I'm not getting any tear out on the bark, so that's good. I'm going to move the tool rest up a bit and continue. I don't know if you notice those nice long shavings. That's a good indication of good, clean, fresh cut green wood. Looks like spaghetti almost coming off of there. That initial cut was pretty deep and aggressive, so what I did is I backed out there and just made it a little bit lighter. You can see now how I'm shaping the curve coming from the shoulder at the bottom of the bowl up to that top rim. But now I'm just leaving that top area because I really want to be careful not to damage it. Now I'm going to sharpen my bowl gouge here because I got to make sure that it's really cutting well and not catching and grabbing and tearing. If you want to learn how to shape and sharpen your bowl gouges, check out my tool sharpening online e-course. Not only do I show you everything you need to know to sharpen all your bowl gouge tools, but I will show you also how to shape this 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge like I use, plus many other bowl gouge profiles as well. So check out that online e-course. I think you'll love it. There's been hundreds of people who have taken it and had great benefit from learning all the aspects of sharpening their tools. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm bringing the tool rest around the side or the front of the lathe, and I'm going to cut from the top of the bowl down. Again, this is to preserve the bark and prevent it from being torn off the top of the wings of the bowl. We just have that little point of bark up at the top that could easily be torn off if I were to push the bowl gouge from the opposite direction. Instead, I'm pushing down and pushing the bark down onto the wood itself. Here I'm using the shear scrape to shape the bottom curve coming out of the shoulder up to the curve of the bowl. And then I'll turn around and do a really light push cut here to merge those areas together. Because the blank is smoothing out or becoming more balanced, I've also got the speed of the lathe up a little bit faster. Remember, you don't want to have any vibration in your bowl blank that's being created because of the speed of the lathe. If you're getting any vibration, you want to slow the lathe down. And if you've slowed the lathe down to a point where it's very slow and you're still getting vibration, you need to check other factors. Okay, it's looking good. I don't like this thicker area on the side of this blank. I would rather that be a little more curved. So I'm going to get in here and remove some of this high spot. And the reason for doing that is the curve initially looked as if it had three different angles. There was like kind of a flat area at the bottom that curved into a corner area that curved into the sidewall. Instead, it wanted to appear as one continuous flowing curve from the bottom up to the top of the wing. Now I'm making a very light cut here, even though I am going in a direction that could potentially push that bark off. And I'm also paying attention to the bark as I'm turning. I'm not getting any little torn out nubs or anything like that. Usually if the bark is going to be temperamental, you will see little areas breaking away, and it'll be a good indication there's going to be other problems. Instead, this bark seems to be holding on pretty well. So I don't have a problem getting in there and making just a little bit of cut towards the bark area. But here on the very top edge, I'm going to make a very light cut to clean up that top edge. And I am going to push the bark onto the wood. Again, these are all body motions. There's no hand or arm movement here at all. I have my hands and arms locked, and I'm leaning forward, shifting my body weight from my knees through my core across that piece. And that's what I'm looking for right there. Nice, clean curve. There's a couple high spots on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my larger bowl gouge. And I went to the larger bowl gouge because it won't vibrate as easily as the 1/2 inch bowl gouge. This is my 5/8 inch bowl gouge. This has the same bevel profile, that 55-degree bevel swept back profile. And I'm using it to do shear scraping to take down any high spots between these transitions. Again, I want this to be really smooth on the exterior. And remember, take your time with the bowl's exterior, because the exterior of the bowl is the bowl. This is what everyone will see when they see the bowl sitting on a table. They're going to see the shape that's made on the outside. So take your time and make it really nice. Now you can do a shear scrape on the wings of this bowl. You just have to really make sure that you're not pushing in towards the bowl, because if you push the gouge into that air gap, you're going to get a nasty smack when the other side comes around. So you can do it, just have to be really, really careful and cautious. All right, so I'm going to clean up the tenon using my spindle detail gouge. And clean up the tenon in the shoulder. The shoulder needs to be a nice flat 90 degrees so it sits on top of the jaws of the four-jaw chuck. And the angle of the tenon needs to be at an angle that matches the dovetail jaws of my chuck. So you just want to take your time, make sure it's nice and clean inside there. You don't want any fibers that didn't get cut away to be blocking the connection. You want that all to be nice and clean in there. We'll pop this off the lathe and put it in the four-jaw chuck. Now I have a little plastic washer on my headstock. I have another chuck that for whatever reason doesn't seat all the way down to the base of the headstock, so I use that all the time with it, and I keep it on there all the time. You just want to make sure there is absolutely no gap anywhere between the chuck and the headstock, and in this case with that plastic spacer, and you want to make sure there's no debris or anything in there. You have a nice flat smooth connection with no gaps. Any gap in there is going to create vibration in your turning. Okay, that's looking good. Now I'm going to bring the tailstock up initially for support, and I'm going to use this time that I have that extra support there to make some more aggressive cuts and clear away some of the material in the center of this, especially that branch. I want to be really careful with that branch because it is protruding out of there and can cause a nasty catch if we're not careful. Okay, so I'm going to be using my 5/8 inch bowl gouge to make these roughing cuts. Just making light passes, applying a lot of down pressure onto the tool rest so that it reduces the amount of vibration I'm getting in the gouge. Each pass is taking no more than 1/8 of an inch of material away, maybe 3 millimeters of material. Do not want to get too aggressive here. But also by clearing out this top area quickly, again, the blank becomes even more balanced, so I can turn the lathe speed up just a bit so I can get nice smooth cuts by maximizing the speed of the lathe. Not getting too fast, but making it just right. If you want to know more about lathe speed and what the appropriate lathe speeds are, check out this video that I have all about lathe speed. It's very important to understand it, and it's a great video to check out. The lathe that I'm turning on is the Robust Sweet 16, and I can make this, just that little small adjustment right there is quite a bit of speed for a bowl blank. So we have the speed optimized now. Now you can see exactly, I wanted to show you this camera view so you can see my view when I'm looking down on the piece as I'm turning. I'm looking down and I'm looking at the outer sidewall of this bowl blank, and I'm matching the bevel of the bowl gouge and making it parallel to the exterior wall. Here you can see how I'm positioning the bowl gouge and lining it up parallel with the outside wall, and then working down the interior of the bowl, just removing a little bit of material at a time. And I'm trying to establish the thickness of that wall. That's the whole purpose right now. And because once that thickness is established, I will continue that wall thickness all the way down the bowl. You can see the bevel of the bowl gouge and then the outside wall of the bowl. And then I'll take a moment and clear away some of the material. I consider this like a little ditch up against the wall of the bowl. Clear some of that out and become a little bit more aggressive here while I'm clearing this away. But as I get closer to that wall, I'll become more precise and make shallow, really light passes until I sneak up on that wall thickness I'm looking for. There you can see what, matching it up to the previous cut, and then coming back and removing some more material. This is the method I really prefer using versus coring out from the middle and then working to the outside wall. And the reason for that is there's a multiple amount of reasons why I do this. And one of them is that it's really easy to maintain the wall thickness because you're really paying attention to the wall thickness. If you were to start from the middle of the bowl and work out, you can be creating a shape in the inside of the bowl as you work out that's completely different than the shape of the bowl. And you could easily get to the outside part of the bowl and have thick and thin spots in the wall that don't work out well. Now here you can see I backed up just a little bit to blend those cuts together. This is what it looks like from the front as I'm doing these cuts. I'm removing the material from the sides and then working down into that final wall thickness. You can see how wet this wood is. It's shiny with the amount of moisture that's coming off of it as I'm making these cuts. And it's a personal preference, of course. There are people that enjoy coring out or cleaning out the center of a bowl by working from the middle out to the walls, and it works fine for them. You just do what works best for you. I've found that working down the wall and then clearing away the center works best for me. I'm not an advocate for saying there's one absolute way you have to do everything. I'm just sharing with you what works well for me. You do what works best for you. And here you can see again how I was worked down to that wall thickness and then just make really light passes when you get close to that previous established wall thickness and then merge them together. The flute is very open here, and that's okay if you're making very light passes. If you try to have the flute open or turned upward and you're making aggressive cuts, you're probably going to get a nasty catch. This is probably one of the more therapeutic and relaxing parts of turning the bowl, is cutting away this material and making these patterns, and it's very rhythmic and relaxing. Whenever you remove, or move rather, the tool rest, you obviously want to make sure the lathe is off, and you want to make sure you hand turn the piece and make sure nothing's going to connect it. Now with these wings spinning around, you also really want to make sure your knuckles are out of the way and you don't overreach across that tool rest, because you'll be made aware of the fact that you've done it if you do it, and it probably won't be pleasant. But you want that tool rest in as close as you can get it for the added support of the bowl gouge, so you can make nice, smooth, final finishing cuts here. You can see I backed up just a little bit. There's no way I would go up to the top of these wings because they're vibrating now, and you would not be able to make a smooth cut up at the top of this bowl. But you can move back just a little bit and merge the cut areas together to make a nice smooth transition. I've switched to my extended J tool rest. I'll have a link for this and all the other tools that I use in this video in the description of this video. And you can also check out more of the tools that I use at my website at turnawoodbowl.com/gear. There you can see all the gear that I recommend and that I use in my shop. So we just need to work that material away until we've reached the bottom continuous curve of the inside of the bowl. Now, like I said at the beginning, the exterior of the bowl is the bowl because essentially the interior is just matching the exterior. That's all we really need to do on the interior. We're not trying to establish any new curves or designs or shapes on the interior of the bowl. We are essentially just mimicking the exterior of the bowl and maintaining an even wall thickness for the bowl. That's why taking your time with the exterior is so important. Here I'm going to use a little piece of tape to mark where the wings are coming across the tool rest. It's really easy for me to reach down in here and get my hand up where the wing of the bowl can grab it. So marking the tool rest with a little tape is going to be a nice reminder of where I need to make sure my hand stays away. You would not want to get smacked with those wings. It will not be pleasant. As we get closer to the surface of the bottom of this, we want to make lighter cuts and we want to take our time and again just sneak up on that wall thickness. Trying to get the tool rest positioned here so that it's more 90 degrees to the bowl gouge. The smaller half-inch bowl gouge was vibrating a bit because if you see where the bowl gouge is touching the tool rest, it's not ideal. You really want about 90-degree support and you want the tool rest to be close to the wood you're cutting. Instead, because of this angle, I'm down a little bit. I could switch over to my micro bevel bowl gouge, but instead I went to a heavier bowl gouge that has the 55-degree bevel swept back, and that's my 5/8 inch bowl gouge. It doesn't vibrate as much as the half-inch because it's thicker. It's just that simple. So I'm going to take my time and make light cuts here, and I'll be able to get the bottom of this bowl merged together. Even though I really don't have the best tool rest support that I could have right now. All right, now, like I said, we're sneaking up on this, so we don't want to hit it all at once because there's a good chance you're going to make it too thin. You can see where the ring is, and it's a little too high right now. So I am going to go back to my half-inch bowl gouge because I don't have to remove much material. There's a very light cut. There's very little pressure on the tool rest or on the bowl gouge, so there's not much vibration, and the half-inch bowl gouge can handle these light cuts. You want to slow down at the middle so you don't tear out fibers. Let's make nice slow passes there, and you can still see there's a line. It's going to be a little bit of an issue. We're going to need to merge those together as well and clean that up. So I'm going to go back a little bit, not too far, because remember, those wings are vibrating. This is wet green wood that is moving. It's not supported in the middle anymore by the core of this bowl, so those wings are flapping in and out as they rotate. Nice light passes, then we're pulling that curve together. You can see how I have the bowl gouge flute open, almost pointing straight up. And as I come to the middle, I close it or turn it to the right, and I go really slow. As a matter of fact, I'm going to shave that down slowly so I don't accidentally rip fibers out. I would rather there be a little nub there that I can sand off than have a torn out area. Now I'm going to use my round nose scraper here just to merge some of these cuts together. I'm not real happy with the overall cut finish of this, so I'm going to use my round nose scraper just to smooth things off a bit. Now what I'm doing here is very light shaving. I'm just taking off any high spots or tool marks. That's all I'm doing. I'm not using this to shape. I'm not really using it to reduce the bottom. I just want to smooth out everything and just make it look really nice and even. Just a very light shave across there. Curves this out really nice. Now I don't use this very frequently because it's a scraper. It has a tendency to tear out fibers, and as a matter of fact, there's some that's torn out there that you might see, and those will have to be sanded out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my time and sand down with the grain all the way around the interior and the exterior. Okay, I'm going to smooth this out using a very coarse sandpaper. Now the only issue I have here right now is this wood is very wet. The only thing I'm doing is trying to remove any tool marks. Typically with a live edge bowl or a natural edge bowl, you're going to have tool marks along the wings. It's almost inevitable. It's very hard to avoid. You can see here what I'm doing is I'm just working those tool marks to clean them up. This wood's wet, so it is not going to sand to a good finish in these conditions. But I can do my best to at least clean it up a bit for the moment. When this bowl is dry, then I can completely sand it and get it to where it's going to be nice and smooth. Okay, so let's take the bottom of this off and let's shape the foot of this. I'm going to use my custom jam chuck. And this is just a piece of scrap wood. I think this is sycamore, and I have a piece of foam padding I put against there just to cushion the inside. And then I'll bring the tailstock up to hold this in place. This is just a friction fit, very simple. I want to make sure that I line it up with the pinhole from the previous time that the tailstock was connected. By doing that, it should be nice and smooth and centered, ready to go. Now you can already see movement in it because it's so wet and green. So I'm going to true up the bottom here, and then I'm going to take the shoulder down, and I'm going to take the tenon down. The tenon right now, if I were to shape that as the foot, it's a little big. I don't need it to be that big, so I'm going to reduce the size of it a bit. And I have to merge the bottom of the bowl with the area of the shoulder that I'm removing. Just making very light cuts here. I'm going to take a look at that. It's still a little high. You can see the section that I'm working on there. I'm going to move the tool rest in so I have a little bit better support. And I'm going to use a shear scraping method to merge and blend those together, those areas together. And shape the outside of the foot and then almost immediately turn into a pull shear scrape cut in the same area. You can see a little bit of movement there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop and I'm going to sand all of the areas, the connecting areas, so they match one another, and there's that transition just blends together. You can see right there, you just take your time with the edge of the sander and blend those areas together. I'm using 120 grit here because it's a little more aggressive. It's going to remove that material and help merge those areas very quickly. Okay, so now that we've got the foot area all set up or established on the outside, we can cut away the inside of the foot. Now I like to make the inside portion of the foot concave just to give it more character and shape, but also to remove that material. I don't want there to be a big thick wet area in the bottom of the bowl, and I especially don't want there to be a big flat bottom on the bowl. I want there to be a nice round rim that will seat well on any surface, on any table or any flat surface. So we remove some of that material. Now I'm doing a back cut and I'm using the lower wing there. You just want to go really slow with that. Take your time. And then I'm using push cuts to remove that nub or to reduce the size of that nub as I'm going. Using the edge of the bowl gouge, I can check and make sure that the area inside the foot is definitely below the rim of the foot. And I'm going to use push cuts to reduce the size of that nub. And then I'll switch to my spindle detail gouge. And I'll use that to continue the curve of the inside of the base right up to the nub. And then I'll continue whittling that nub down to become smaller and smaller. You can stop here and just cut that off if you'd like, and then sand the area in the middle so it's nice and smooth. The way I like to do it is I'll make the pass, blend all these cuts together so that everything's smooth, apply forward pressure, and turn the lathe off. And that will sever the nub from the base of the bowl. You remove the tailstock, take the little nub off, and now we can sand that the little bit of protrusion at the bottom. When you sand like this, you want to make sure you don't bump into the foot, because it will take away little sections of the foot there. And you also want to rotate it around like I just did. I flipped it around so that it's getting sanded on both sides, so there's no flat spot in there. And here's the finished piece. You can see that nice flowing curve going from wing to wing. It's balanced throughout. It's looking pretty good. I love the shape of the live edge bowls. The bark is holding on really well. I think it's gonna hang on. This is a pretty nice piece overall. So here it is, the live edge Magnolia Grandiflora or Southern Magnolia bowl. I think it turned out really nice. You know, you never know what you're going to get with a live edge bowl. And in here you can see there's actually a branch that it's going out somewhere. It must be in here and coming out the side, I don't know. But you can see a cross section of that branch in the bottom of this bowl. So you never know what you're going to get when you turn a live edge piece, or any piece for that matter, really. Right now the bark is behaving. As this dries, it may contract and we may have some problems with that bark. If the bark comes off, we simply just sand the edge and then it becomes a natural edge bowl versus a live edge bowl. But I think we may have some luck with this bark. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to let this sit in the house. I'm going to let it equalize to the temperature and the humidity in the air. It should dry or equalize in a week, maybe 2 weeks, because this is relatively thin. The moisture that's in this wood is going to escape rather quickly. And hopefully we won't have any cracking. I've taken my time to make these walls really even, and the base is even as well. So hopefully we won't see any cracking with that. Once this is equalized and feels relatively dry, I will sand it again and apply a finish to it. I'm probably going to use the tried and true Danish oil, which is just pure linseed oil, and then I'll have a really nice simple finish to this. And that's pretty much it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I showed you guys a few little tips on how to make a live edge bowl work well for you on the lathe. Let me know in the comments below if you've turned a live edge bowl like this, or if you plan on turning one, and if you picked up any tips from this video on how to best turn a live edge bowl. All right, guys, if you've liked this video, do me a huge favor and, yeah, click that like button. Thank you. I greatly appreciate that. Subscribe if you're not already subscribing, and check out my website, turnawoodbowl.com. I got tons of information there on everything you need to know about turning wood bowls. So check that out. All right, guys, as always, until next time, happy turning. Okay, so we've got a little treat for all you guys that hung on and stayed with me. You can see the piece dried. This was only 7 days later, and you can see the base of it closer to the pith area, how it's all wobbly. It all deformed there, but the piece is relatively equalized and dry now. So the shaping has finished. You can see how the bark is dry. It's holding on really well. So all in all, it turned out really good. Now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten out this bottom. This thing has to sit smooth. It should not be bouncing around. I have another video where I made this sanding disc. If you haven't seen that, you're gonna want to check it out, and you're probably going to want to make one of these sanding discs. So I'll put a link to that in the top corner here. So just take a little bit of time and sand this bottom smooth. That's all it takes. We've got a nice clean bottom. This is also a reason why you want to take that middle out of the foot of this bowl. It makes, you're just sanding that rim out. Now I'm going to take my time. I'm going to sand this, and I'm going to go through all the grits, and I'm going to make sure that I've got a nice smooth finish. Obviously this isn't quite as easy as sanding it on the lathe, but it's the next best thing. I'm going to do both the interior and the exterior, and I'm going to go through the various grits, and I'll sand this down to 320 grit. I'm going to sign it using my wood burner. I like using the chisel tip for this. It just makes a nice clean line that I found works really well. And then I'm going to use tried and true Danish oil. Now the Danish oil is a little different than their original finish. The original finish has beeswax in it. This does not have beeswax in it. It's just the Danish oil. The reason I use just Danish oil on these live edge bowls is because I can really let it soak into the bark. The bark is very dry and those pores are open. It's very porous, so it will absorb that oil, and I can put a couple coats of this Danish oil on it, and it looks really nice when it's done. It's a little more labor intensive because I have to build up the layers. Plus, if I use the original with the beeswax on it, it gets a little bit thick on the bark, and you really don't want it to get thick because it'll get gummy. But with the Danish oil like this, it soaks in really nice. Now there's the finished piece, complete with a flat bottom and a really nice coat of Danish oil. This turned out to be a really nice bowl. Thanks for sticking around to see the whole piece. I hope you like it. Leave me a comment below and let me know what you think. Let me know if you've turned a live edge bowl like this as well. Love looking at all those wood grain.